This is Do It For A Living, your source for inside information on the future of automotive performance.
You can't keep your head down working all day. You got to start managing the guys and teach guys and be patient with guys. And that was probably the biggest success I've had in the business, is making that transition, it was a tough thing to do. It was definitely the right thing to do, to step back from that and start focusing on managing my business.
What's holding you back from starting or growing your business into what it can be? Well, if you're listening to this, it's not a lack of information. What you're about to hear is all you need to get motivated and start making waves. Do It For A Living podcast details the journey of today's true players in their own words. Find out how they broke out so you can too. The time is now. The time is always now.
Welcome back. I've got Jeremy Gerber from Roadster Shop. If you're not familiar with Roadster Shop, they are they build a lot of classic cars, and they've actually gotten into a lot of pro touring and a lot of modern, even modern cars. And they are really a complete custom. I mean, they do body work, metal work, paint. They do engine building. They do basically everything you can imagine to these cars. And the shop is really one of the best in the country as far as I'm concerned. In 2014, this is where I kind of learned from these guys. They built the Camaro. It's a 70 Camaro, and it won the Gran Turismo Car of the Year award at SEMA. And the car was featured in the GoPro booth, and they also had a Chevy Colorado that was also in the GoPro booth as well. And they are really, really top-notch builds, and these are just two of, I'm sure, thousands of cars they've built over the years. So, Jeremy, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I really appreciate you taking some time to talk to us. Normally this podcast has been kind of devoted to import performance stuff, but you do exactly what we do, just more on the domestic side. I don't think you're working on GTRs or Evos or anything like that, but what you do is definitely comparable to what a lot of the shops that we've interviewed in the past. And so it's really cool to kind of venture off and see what some of the domestic guys are doing.
Yeah.
So go ahead and let's get started here. So why don't you go ahead and tell us about yourself? How did you get started, and what got you involved in cars?
Well, I guess getting involved in cars, probably like a lot of guys, it's young age, something that I was, I guess, more or less born into. My dad was a gearhead, and his dad was in the automotive business, and his dad was in the automotive business. So we're kind of multiple generations of car enthusiasts. And, I just more or less grew up with, working on little projects with my dad, whether it was some muscle car stuff in the garage, building go-karts, working on dune buggies. And I don't know, I took to that stuff a lot more than sports and messing around, and just had a knack for it and had just a major interest in it, and it just stuck. I loved it when I was a kid, and I still love it just as much to this day.
So did your grandfather and father have like shops as well, or were they just mechanics?
So my great grandfather, he started in the automotive glass business, and that would have been I want to say in like the early 1930s, and my grandpa then took over that business, and from there, my father, he kind of went to the family business and then spun it off into an auto collision business, and had about 15 locations, and actually grew that into one of the largest auto collision companies in the country. And that was something that I grew up going to work with Dad, and it was always just neat to jump in and work on all these cars and get my hands dirty.
Okay, so this was you were essentially learning on the job then, and that's where you got a lot of the bodywork, I'm guessing, experience? Yeah,
the bodywork experience, absolutely. I mean, I've got memories from being 8, 9, 10 years old, and I'd kind of head to the shop when I was off of school, or in the summertime, and he'd park me with somebody out and back, whether I was working with some preppers or a body guy or working in the paint department, and I just kind of floated around the shop and picked up a heck of a lot of skills, and I quickly found out that it was something that I kind of had a talent for, and I really enjoyed doing it.
So it runs in the family then, huh?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so did you go to school at all for like tech school or college, anything like that?
So I did, yeah. That was kind of, I mean, a little bit of an unusual experience for me. You know, when I got out of high school, I didn't have, I guess I wasn't looking to go to school for business, and all my friends, and they had these, people were going for marketing, and everybody wants to go just to get a degree in business. And I had really had no, no aspirations to do that. I wanted to work with my hands, and I ended up going to I found a tech school that it was in Michigan. The school is called Ferris State, and they offered an auto body program. So I went and did that, and that was, really just, I hate to say anything bad, but for me, it was just a horrible experience. And it was, it was it was a funny deal because I went, I enrolled in a program that I thought I'd really learn something, and it would, I'd gain some skills and be able to apply it. But what ended up happening is that the experience that I had prior to going to that school was far greater than any of the experience that they could give me. So I basically kind of finished their entire class schedule in like the first month of school, and more or less had nothing to do. It was so entry level. I had been working as a full-time body man in a pretty well-known reputable collision shop, so it was just I didn't take anything out of it. It was more for entry level, kind of geared for really somebody coming right out of high school, never picked up a tool and wanted to learn to be a body man.
So did you get as an associate's degree or a tech degree? What kind of certification?
I kind of threw in the towel after the first semester there.
Okay.
So that gives you an idea of about how enjoyable it was for me. It just like I said, I blew through everything, and it was just so rudimentary. And after the first semester, I kind of threw in the towel and went a different direction.
Okay, and what kind of time frame is this at?
So I graduated, I'm a pretty young guy, I'm 33. I graduated high school in 2001.
Okay.
And that was in 2001, so that was my first semester, my college experience.
Gotcha. And I'm actually from Holland, which is right by Ferris State. So
okay.
And I'm 35.
So no disrespect.
Yeah. So I'm familiar with the school.
Okay.
Okay, so when did you kind of ramp yourself up? I mean, after you dropped out of college, where did you go from there? Or not? Well, dropped out of tech school.
Yeah, I kind of dropped out of tech school, and then I guess I was a little bit lost at that point. I wanted a little bit of that college experience, so I ended up transferring to a school in Iowa where I had some friends and just started doing some general education stuff, and I immediately missed working with my hands, so I kind of cruised around town and applied for a position at a few body shops in town, and ended up nobody wanted to hire me. I was just really kind of just a young kid. I had a heck of a lot of experience, but it was I could only work X amount of hours a day, couldn't be full time, and just didn't work out. So I spent another semester there. So that was my all in all, about a year in school, and I really just missed working with my hands. And it's neat. It was you get a little taste of what college life was like, and I guess the partying and the bar hopping and all that stuff. It's fun, but it wasn't for me. I kind of at that point knew that I was ready to go to work, and I didn't want to waste any more time. So I threw in the towel a second time, and I hate to sound like a quitter, but school's never really been my thing. So after that, I came home and went right to work.
Okay, were you working with your dad at that point then?
So yeah, at that point, I came back and I went to work full time as a body man for my dad. Just doing, you name it, from whether it was just some minor collision work, fender repairs, some filler work, all the way up to unisides and quarter panels and rockers and structural stuff. And I did that through the summer. And after that, I started kind of pursuing the hot rod path, which is really what I always knew I wanted to do. It's what my dad knew I wanted to do, and it's kind of what he always wanted to do as well. And that was about the fall. Worked my way through that summer, and then in the fall I got a job at a hot rod shop, and that was kind of how I got my foot into the door in this industry.
Okay, what was the name of that shop?
So the shop, here's kind of how all this unravels, is that the Roadster shop was actually owned by an older gentleman named Bill O'Rourke, and at one point in time in the 80s, it was a sizable shop, had a great reputation, and he fell on some hard times, got divorced, and just kind of scaled the shop way back. And it was, being in Illinois, there's not a heck of a lot of hot rod shops. It's not like Southern California, so you got about 2 shops out this way, and I ended up getting a job working for him, who was the previous owner of the Roadster shop, and it was me and 3 other guys, so just a real small scale operation, and that's kind of how I got my foot in the door there.
Okay, so it was called the Roadster shop, and that was your first job?
It was, yep, that's right.
I guess technically your first
my first hot rod job.
Okay. Okay. And so kind of how did you take over this? I mean, how did that transpire?
So I worked for Bill for about 2 years, and got just some really great experience. And he was like a old school hot rodder, just really down and dirty. And I started working for him for $5 an hour, and I was just ecstatic. I was 21 years old, and no, actually, at the time I think I'd have been 20. So I was just ecstatic to work there, and I would do anything and everything I could do. I'd work round the clock. I wouldn't get paid for it, but I just wanted to be there, and it was just a dream job. So I worked for him for 2 years, and he was a great guy, a pretty good mentor, and suddenly he got cancer, and it was just one of those kind of cancers that instantly took him. And from the time they found out he had cancer, it may be a month before it just really, he deteriorated, and it was just all over for me, and ended up passing away. So he had a son that really didn't have much interest in taking over the business, and the timing had kind of worked out perfectly that my brother, he was just graduating from college. My father, he had just sold his business and was getting out of the auto collision business. And the 3 of us, we knew we're a super tight family. We knew we wanted to work together, and we knew we wanted to be in the hot rod industry, and it was an opportunity to kind of hit the ground running. So we purchased what was kind of left of the Roadster shop, which at the time it was basically a name and a couple of drill presses and a few old rusty chassis jigs. So that was how we got our start.
Very cool. So do you think of yourself as an entrepreneur? I mean, like starting this, or you're not really starting it, but you're taking over this business, and you're going to have to be managing this. Is this something you like always wanted to do, or is it just you wanted to be in the hot rod industry?
I always wanted to be in the hot rod industry, and I figured, I always wanted to be self-employed, work for myself. I'm a hard worker. My dad's a hard worker. My brother's a hard worker, and I knew I would have success in it, and I just felt I needed to gain some knowledge. I was still young and green. And, it was a good opportunity to kind of learn the ropes. But at the time I was still a young kid. I didn't really necessarily look at myself as an entrepreneur. Just really a hard worker, and had a pretty good talent and a knack for building hot rods at the time. Okay,
and what made you want to do it on your own rather than working for somebody else?
I guess kind of being raised, everybody in my family, like I said, my great-grandpa, my grandpa, my father, they've all been self-employed and have all had, pretty good success in their life. So I was kind of raised with that mentality, and, I just knew that given my work ethic and, kind of my common sense, I knew I'd rather do it for myself. I've got an awful lot of creativity, and I kind of knew the direction that I wanted to go, and I thought once I gained a little bit of experience that I didn't need anybody to help me get there. At that point, I was ready to kind of do it on my own.
Okay, so it was a natural fit, and you had your family backing you, so it wasn't a hard decision to make, huh?
Right.
Okay, how has location played a role in your success? I mean, you said you're in you're outside of Chicago, right? And that's, I'm assuming, where the shop's always been.
Yeah. So we've moved once, and location, that's an interesting thing about this business, is that location, it really doesn't play much of a role at all, especially from the early stages of it. We were located in a small facility about 7,000 square feet in Elgin, Illinois, and it was kind of a rough neighborhood. If you left anything outside, you can rest assured it'd be gone in the morning. There were homeless guys knocking on the door all the time, and not the kind of place that's conducive to selling $500,000 vehicles and $20,000-$30,000 chassis out of. So you're looking at it on paper, I mean, you would never think that would work, but most of our business is out of state, and seldom do our customers even ever step foot in our facilities. So getting a start there, I think probably the thing that helped the most was just working in such a kind of a small, rough, crude environment. I mean, mentally, I think that helped when we eventually moved, that it helped just kind of build some character and make me understand, what I could do in that facility, moving into a much larger facility, what I'd be capable of doing there. So as far as sales go, customer base, I don't think it really had any weight on it, but just as far as building character, I think that's what it did.
And the Chicagoland area has obviously a pretty big, I guess, hot rod community and market, I guess.
It's a fair size market. You'll see I think there's more of a following with kind of the exotic stuff. A lot of like car events and little cruise-ins and cars and coffees and more events for that type of vehicle. You'll see a fair amount of little cruise nights and where your local hot dog stand, there'll be 20, 30 cars. And then some of the larger towns, they'll have like once a month a little cruise in. But in our area, it's not real conducive to high-end classic cars. You'll see a lot of what are kind of known or labeled as cruise night cars, just kind of your home-built stuff that nothing real high-end. It's not like being out in California where you'll see a professionally built 32 Roadster cruising down the street, or a high-end muscle car just parked in a parking lot somewhere.
I gotcha. Okay. So have you ever doubted yourself and wondered if this isn't going to work, and how do you overcome that feeling and move forward?
I think that really, I think my success comes from never doubting yourself. So if I sat back and doubted myself, I think I'd probably get wrapped up in that. So really the way I've approached it is that you just can't have that mentality. I never think about failure. I never even consider the possibility of it.
All right. And what's the worst experience you've had in business?
Oh, the worst experience I've had in business. I mean, it's so full of great experiences, but there's quite a few bad ones mixed in there. I think as you get larger and larger, you'll find that there's, more and more bad experiences as well as good experiences. But probably the worst experience I've had is kind of, and I guess maybe this does fall kind of back on the doubting yourself a little bit, but not doubting that it wouldn't work, but I guess doubting my skill level as this business grew. And we went from 3 employees to 60 employees. You start looking at things a little differently as far as how you structure things and how you run your operations. And I kind of got to the point where I started, I guess, second guessing myself and thinking that I needed somebody as kind of a production engineer to come in and, I guess, alleviate my day-to-day involvement in running all the operations. And I brought somebody on, and that probably lasted for maybe about 4 months, and I think it was probably the most detrimental thing that I've done in my business, and that I kind of gave him the ropes, showed him how I run things and how I want things done, and then kind of leaned on his experience to help elevate the company, and kind of lost touch with I'm super hands-on, and I'm out there working with the guys and jumping in and buddy with the guys, and I feel like I just kind of lost a little bit of the connection with some of the guys in that time period, and the business just kind of veered off path and didn't continue to go the direction that I wanted it to go. So I made some changes there and brought it back, and I think that was, if I had to put my finger on one bad experience, I don't know that it's necessarily the worst, but it's not the best. That'd probably be the one.
Okay. And what's something you're doing right now that has you fired up?
I think I'm always pushing to do new stuff. I'm never really satisfied with what we've got going on, so I kind of always remain fired up. I try to bite off more than I can chew and really push to get it done. So I think we've got a lot of neat chassis projects in the works that they really keep me energized. But we've got some kind of top secret build projects that are they've kind of been backburnered, and we dive into them when we get the free time to do it. And those are some things that I think you'll see in the next couple of years that are kind of a big change in direction for the company, or I mean, adding just a whole new genre to the company that I'm pretty fired up about, and that really gets me stoked to keep pushing and seeing what else we can conquer and how diverse we can get in this industry.
So I'm pretty confident that we'll probably see these at one of the big car shows then, huh?
I think so. Yeah, it'll be they'll be popping up here pretty soon.
All right. Before we continue on, I wanted to take a second and tell everyone about My Shop Assist. If you own or work for a performance shop of any type, such as installation shops, tuning, engine, transmission, or even custom fabrication, take some time and think about how organized and efficient your operation is. Our goal at Do It For a Living is to tell success stories on the industry and educate you, the listener, on how to be successful in your business. My Shop Assist was developed for this very reason and helps to address many of the most common shortcomings at shops. With My Shop Assist being cloud-based, you have access to your data from anywhere. You will have a built-in calendar, track tasks and parts on every job you have, track time, document your work with notes and pictures, as well as files such as tuning files and data logs. Individualized task lists for techs and reports to measure their efficiency. Jobs can be exported to QuickBooks for accounting. So MSA was designed to be simple to use and will help anyone from a one-man shop up to the top-performing shops in our industry. Check out the system for free at www.myshopassist.com. Okay, so go ahead and tell us about the business. So you kind of mentioned it a little bit, and we talked a little bit before we started the show, but Roadster Shop is a enormous company.
It's gotten large. Yeah, it's growing fast.
Especially for typically when you think of like a builder or a shop building, cars, you would think maybe like 2 to 10 people. But go ahead and tell us, like, how big is the space you're in? Do you rent it? Do you own it?
So the space we're in, we started off here when we moved facilities. Like I said, we went from 7,000 square feet into 30,000 square feet. And just this past year, we added an additional 20,000 square feet for a dedicated chassis manufacturing facility. Prior to that, it was all under one roof. So we own the building. Me and my brother own it. And currently, we're a combined 50,000 square feet. And kind of as we speak, we're undergoing more and more renovations. So adding a whole new dyno area to the shop that's its own dedicated facility, adding some new engineering offices and an employee lounge. So the shop's kind of just evolving constantly.
Okay, and you said it's you and your brother. Is your dad still involved in this?
My dad's still involved. He's more or less retired, kind of enjoying himself, and he's kind of the man behind the scenes and just brings the old wisdom to the table. He's a guy to fall back on, and he's had like I said, a very successful business, very respected guy in the industry, and he's kind of at this point just enjoying himself.
Okay. And so how is the business structured? Is it like a S corp or a C corp or
So it's
LLC?
S corp business.
Okay. And then is it just you and your brother as the sole owners now?
Just me and my brother. That's it.
Very cool. And so have you guys ever written a formal business plan?
No, I never have. No, that's that's I guess the interesting thing about how we approach things is that I kind of just more or less bust ass, work hard, and go for it. I know a lot of guys who really sit down and spend more time, almost too much time, putting together projections and structured business plans. And I, for one, there's a time and a place for that. I don't think that it has a place in this industry. I think this industry is driven off of good ideas, hard work, and good customer service. So you can write down as many projections as you want and as many mission statements and follow it by the book, but I don't believe that's the way to go in this hot rod industry.
Okay. How many employees do you have?
So at the moment we've got right at 60 employees.
And can you kind of break it down, like how they, like what roles these people play? Like how do you break them down?
So the employee, the way that's structured is that it's kind of really segregated and departmentalized. So there's a group of sales guys up in front that handle primarily chassis sales. So I've got 2 sales guys in-house, and then I've got 1 sales guy on the road, an outside sales guy, handles a lot of the show stuff. And in addition to them up front, we've just got general office staff, a couple accountants up there, front office personnel, just kind of all your basic positions. And then moving out into the shop, there's CNC department, which is made up of just two guys running production parts, running custom parts. Alongside them, we've got kind of a final assembly department, which is made up of four guys who are really dedicated to general service work, installations, and then all the final assembly work on the vehicles we build. One guy runs parts department, and then in the main facility that houses all of our customer builds, that is all kind of just split in half, basically. Body shop guys, that there's about five guys back there in the body shop, and then there's fabricators. So fab guys are working on strictly customer projects, custom builds, metal shaping, and probably at the moment there's about 10 guys on that side. So I'd say you got about 15 guys right back there in the hot rod shop.
Okay. And so you have probably leads in each kind of area to help manage those people then, huh?
Moving into the chassis department, that's kind of what's really growing and growing and growing. So that, again, just like the hot rod shop, you've got frame rail builders, parts builders, dedicated chassis builders, chassis assembly guys, and then shipping, crating, shipping, receiving. And above them, sitting on some mezzanine offices, we've got two engineers, full-time engineers. And then there's two guys that, one engineer type guy that helps out with just general bracketry, shop organization, and shop layout and flow, and then another guy who runs our CNC plasma table. And in both departments, since the shop is kind of split with vehicles and chassis, there's one foreman in each department. So kind of number one guy from each one of those departments, they kind of made their way up the ropes and became shop foremen. And both guys that have been with me a real long time. And really up until about the past year, I kind of ran the whole shebang. So it was all on my shoulders, and it just got to the point where it got too big, and I really needed to reach out and bring in some additional help. So I just leaned on the guys who I knew were my main men.
Okay, so do you find it difficult to manage all these people, or keeping them on task? Is it pretty well structured now, where they know exactly what they need to do without somebody watching over them?
It's pretty well structured. I mean, we hire quality guys. The guys that work here have relocated from all over the country to do this job. So keeping them on task and just the general management of the guys, that's really not difficult. I mean, it's managing the projects, making sure that the guys have the parts they need, the materials they need, and just have clear direction on what they need to do. As long as I myself and the shop foremans are doing their job, then everything goes pretty smooth.
Okay. And where do you find these people from to hire them? I mean, are you looking for specific hot rod builders, or what kind of requirements do you look for in an employee then?
The hot rod side, that's probably the most difficult thing that I've found to staff, and I think over the years I've learned the right way to do it. I mean, we've hired a lot of guys. I've brought in guys from like the auto body, the collision industry, and years ago, before we really got big and well known, I had a group of guys who were basically collision background, and I learned pretty quickly that I was spending more of my time going back and redoing what they did to bring it up to the level of quality that I wanted, that it just quickly realized that I can't employ that type of guy. They need to really have the background, some metal shaping, some fabrication background, but the most important thing for them is just having, I guess, a real love and passion for hot rods, because you can't do this job unless you're really dedicated and love cars. It's got to be your hobby. It's got to be your life. So the guys I've found on the hot rod side, a lot of them just through social media. We'll post a lot of stuff on Instagram, Facebook to try to seek them out. But I guess I've really found that the best fabricators, the guys who fit the best in this shop, are guys that have seeked me out, who see the Roadster shop, they see the vehicles we've built, they see the way we operate, and they want to be a part of it. So they seek me out to come work here, and they've had a lot of success, and I've had a lot of success because of it.
Very cool. So break down your sources of revenue. So you have obviously a lot of different revenue streams. Part sales, service, manufacturing. It sounds like you have engineering work you do as well. Kind of break that down for us.
So it used to be pretty much 50-50 right down the middle. It was custom car builds, 50%, chassis sales, manufacturing, 50%. They've both really continued to grow steadily, but the chassis stuff is that's an easier it's a product line you can market, and that's taken off, and it's just going like wildfire. So it's really grown to the point where the chassis business probably makes up about 70% of the overall business at the Roadster shop. We don't really do any retail part sales. I found years ago that was just more of a headache for me than it was worth. We used to have like a retail showroom, and I'd spend all my Saturdays and Sundays digging through drawers and laying out a brake system for a guy for $50, only to have him come back Monday and return it all because the fittings didn't work right. So I've stayed away from all of that, and we're introducing the CNC stuff into the product line, but currently that's still kind of geared more, that kind of meshes with the car build, since most of the stuff we're making there, it's custom one-off parts for the vehicle build. So I kind of just look at it as a chassis shop and a hot rod shop.
Okay.
So it's
and for our listeners who aren't familiar with some of the stuff, because it is definitely different than how the import cars are doing it. You're building actual like frame rail chassis, not bodies for the car, and you're selling that, correct?
Correct. On the chassis side, we manufacture virtually every component to make up a bolt-on chassis. So coming from basically muscle cars that predominantly had a complete frame that could be removed from the car, they weren't all unibody. Some of them were, but we manufacture the frame rails, the bushings, the sleeves, the control arms, the spindles. I mean, you name it, it's built here in-house. We outsource shocks and steering racks and basically rear ends, and that's about it. Everything else is made right here under our roof.
Okay, and the reason for this market is that the older cars, they rust out. I know they're not very stiff, and so they have a lot of flex, and they age over time. So my buddy or Todd here has got a '69 Camaro that the frame rails in the front were sagging so badly he could barely get it to a line, never drove straight, right? That's kind of what you're addressing, right?
I guess we address two things. I mean, number one, you address the strength issues, but our biggest focus is the performance end of it. That any of these muscle cars from the 60s, 70s, people all have this, they've got these memories of driving these just neat cars. The styling was so iconic. Cars are loud, they're fast, but you forget about how horrible they were to drive. You've got 30, 40, 50 years of driving cars that have evolved with modern amenities, and people forget that. They remember the cool factor of it, but they forget that the cars basically suck to drive. So, and I forget it myself when I get in a stock suspension muscle car with a stock 4-speed and a stock motor. They're kind of almost a death trap at this point. You drive one down the street and the car drives itself. I mean, it wanders all over the road. It kind of takes you for a ride. So what we've done is design our own geometry and add just massive performance improvements to where we're building a chassis that bolts underneath a 70 Chevelle and takes that car from being an old clunky muscle car to something that you wouldn't know that you're in a 70 Chevelle. It's going to feel just like jumping in a new Z06 Corvette. So it's the performance, the ride quality, strength. Now with the big horsepower motors, there's not a chassis that leaves here that's not receiving some form of 600 plus horsepower LS motor. So we certainly address, I think every issue that a muscle car has is addressed in a Roadster shop chassis.
Okay. And are you building these chassis for like other shops, or are they like individuals who want them and are doing them themselves? Kind of how do you sell and market a chassis like that?
A little bit of both. We market them, do a substantial amount of print advertising. So we're in Street Rodder and Super Chevy and Mustangs and classic trucks. But you get a lot of the end user, so just direct to the home builder where he's going to take his 55 Chevy and chassis swap it in his garage. But the bulk of our business comes from working with shops. So there might be a shop. I've got shops that buy 10 plus chassis a year for projects that they're doing. A lot. lot of shops out there. It's surprising is how many shops there are out there doing this type of work.
Mm-hmm. And so the builds you're doing, they are complete restorations. Like, you're not taking a car in and doing a water pump, are you? You're not doing like general service stuff as well, or do you do a little bit of everything?
We don't. I steer away from all that. That's again one of those things that's just more trouble than it's worth. We keep ourselves more than busy with our own workload of building vehicles, assembling them, servicing our own cars. That I stay away from just your general service work. If it's some sort of substantial install, whether it's a supercharger or suspension upgrade, we'll take it on. But your average guy bringing in his Mustang for a leaky water pump, we kind of shy away from that.
All right. And you mentioned it just briefly here. What kind of advertising and marketing are you doing, and what kind of sources? Are you using Facebook? Obviously word of mouth and building cars, trade shows, forums.
So advertising, we do an awful lot, and that's something that we've focused on since day one. And it's something that seems like you really got to pay your dues with it. You've got to continue to market and market and market until eventually you kind of get your name out there as a mainstay. So we started off before social media was around, so just print ads. We were just like the magazines I'd mentioned, Street Rodder and Super Chevy and Hot Rod and all that stuff. But the market's kind of changed as far as advertising goes, and social media seems to be one of the biggest avenues, the best avenues for us to market ourselves in. So on Instagram right now, I think we've got about 160,000 followers, and I don't know, maybe around 40,000 followers on Facebook. And it's just such a great avenue to just put stuff out there instantly, and you can market just very precisely. You can put exactly what you want out there and put it in front of the people you want. You're putting it right in front of your core audience, and I think that's probably our best source of advertising right now. Along with that, we do all the forums. We're on Lateral G and a lot of other pro touring forums, some Tri-5 Chevy forums, some C10 forums. We try to get involved in all the forums that apply to the chassis and the cars that we do. Okay.
And it doesn't hurt to build a great product, right?
So I think that's it. That speaks for itself. I mean, word of mouth is priceless, and you're never gonna outdo just your classic word of mouth advertising, but that comes from, like you say, building a quality product and building a good reputation and building a name for yourself.
Okay, and the two builds that I talked about in the intro were the 70 Camaro and the Colorado truck. Like, what are those? Who brings you those projects? Is that your internal, like your project, or does GoPro bring that to you? How did you pick up those kind of jobs?
So, believe it or not, both of those cars, they were branded GoPro, and the GoPro deal, that just happened to kind of be a nice relationship where GoPro featured our cars in their booth. So, kind of to reciprocate, we lettered them up with the GoPro logos. But the Camaro that we built, that was built for a good customer of ours. And the Colorado, that's kind of a neat project. For the past, I want to say 3 years, we've kind of partnered with General Motors, and they've got a SEMA kind of project that they do every year, and they select X amount of builders. It could be anywhere from one kind of elite builder up to 5 or 6 builders, and they'll donate a car to you of your choice. You've got several to choose from, but within that range, you pick a car that you want to modify, and they give you the car, give you a title to the car, and it's your duty to modify that car, place it at SEMA, and debut it at SEMA. So that's what that Chevy Colorado was. That was a GM sponsorship, and it was something that we did for the shop and just kind of ran wild with.
Yeah, and it's pretty crazy. And you guys don't do a lot of trucks like that, I'm guessing, huh?
We don't. That one was kind of hobby-driven. My brother, myself, my dad, we're all into long travel sand cars and dirt bikes and off-road stuff. So that was a neat way to dive into that market. Always wanted to build a pre-runner truck, and I guess that just gave us an excuse to do it. So that's what we did. And then much like everything else we did, it just kind of snowballed and went crazy. You can't just have off-the-shelf control arms. You've got to have Roadster shop engineered, laser cut, chromoly box, clear coated control arms. It's got to, if this guy's got 20 inches of travel, it needed to travel 28 inches. So it was an exercise. It was a fun exercise to let kind of our engineering staff run wild, our fabricators run wild. I spent countless hours out in the shop doing sheet metal work on that truck. And the busier we get, the bigger we get. I don't get to do that as much as I'd like. So that was a good opportunity for me to get out there and kind of do what I love to do.
Okay, and for the listeners that haven't seen your Facebook or Instagram, I mean, the stuff you do is really, really awesome. So definitely check it out so you can see these cars we're kind of talking about. But how many hours a week are you actually working?
Too many, just way too many, I think. But, I'd say on average, 60 to 70 is kind of a normal week.
Okay,
and that's actually scaled back a lot. I find that the more organized we get, the more successful we get. I'm able to kind of step back a little bit. So it went from being something where I worked from 7 in the morning till 11 at night, 7 days a week, to, now I get here at 8. I try to leave around 7 or 8, and then Saturdays, whether I work a full day, a half day, but Sundays, at this stage in the game, I'm able to take off and kind of enjoy life a little bit, enjoy the family. But you got to put in the hours. This is certainly not a 40-hour job, and it's not a job where you punch the time clock and you're gonna get out what you put in. So
right. So you have a family. Has that changed your work schedule at all?
It probably should have, but no, it hasn't. I do have a family. I've got a wife and 2 kids, 2 young kids, 3 and 5, and great kids. My son, he's got a knack for this. He loves cars. He comes and hangs out in the shop, and I think that's probably one of the most enjoyable things that I get to do is just spend time with him. I'm teaching him all about what I do, teaching him about the cars, and just watching the excitement that he gets out of it.
Okay. Do you spend all your time doing the work, or are you managing the business? I mean, some people like to pay people to hire or to manage a shop, and then you do all the manual labor stuff. But it sounds like you're doing a little bit of both, huh?
Yeah, that was, I guess, something where I kind of hit like a crossroads where I was spending really all my time just working in the shop as a fabricator. So if I wasn't building chassis, I was doing sheet metal work. And I guess kind of as the business grew, we got more projects. I took on more employees. I found that I wasn't managing the business properly. I was getting wrapped up in my work, and I was being very effective because I'm fast. I'm good at fabricating, so I could sit there and work on one car and get it done faster than a lot of guys. But I came to the realization that managing the guys, I could make 10 guys get things done fast instead of just myself, which as one person I could never do that. So kind of reached that point, and that was some advice from my dad that he really pushed me and kept telling me, you've got to kind of hang up the tools, and you can't keep your head down working all day. You got to start managing the guys and teach guys and be patient with guys. And that was probably the biggest success I've had in the business, is making that transition, which was a tough thing to do. I mean, it's kind of a hit to your pride. I'd always been the guy shaping sheet metal, and like any other fabricator, you're proud of your accomplishments, you're proud of what you made, but it was definitely the right thing to do, to step back from that and start focusing on managing my business and focusing on new products and where I want the business to go. So I don't think you couldn't hire somebody to take my role. Nobody would be as emotionally connected to the business. Nobody would be as passionate about it. And I've been the driving force behind it. So how can I bring somebody in that's going to just generate a new product or put in the effort that I'm going to? So I still, from time to time, I can jump in there and, there's things that I can fabricate, and there's always a time and a place for it. But for the most part, at this point, I'm kind of managing it. And with 60 employees, it's a big business now. So yeah, that's what's got to be done.
And you avoided the pitfall of making it the Jeremy Gerber built Roadster shop car. It was always just a shop and not associated with just you doing the work, right?
Yeah, I've always been that way, and you see that almost everybody you see in the hot rod industry, and I think you see it more in the hot rod industry than you do anywhere else. There's massive egos, and everything almost every shop you'll see out there is somebody's name or a form of somebody's name. So that was something that from day one, I concentrate on building a team. There's guys here who are better metal shapers than me. There's guys here who are better engineers than me, and I like building the Roadster shop, not Jeremy Gerber or Phil Gerber. It's I'm kind of the guy that I'll debut a car, and it can be a showstopper. It could win every award out there, and you'll never hear me kind of bragging about it. I'd rather stand back, watch people's reaction, and while people are talking about it or praising the car, I'm already thinking about the next thing I'm going to do. So, I'm certainly not one chasing fame. I like building that, building the brand and making all my guys kind of feel accomplished and proud of the Roadster shop. I don't think they would. I don't think they'd stand behind me and push as hard as they do if it was Jeremy Gerber's hot rods. It's we're all working for a common goal here.
So do you do a pretty good job of keeping your employees? I mean, is your pay and your benefits packages and stuff like that, is that enough to keep the people on board and liking working for you?
I believe it is. This is an industry where you've got a lot of kind of fly-by-night shops, a lot of bad experiences out there with guys not getting paid, shops going broke, guys getting paid under the table, guys not getting paid overtime. I mean, it goes on and on and on. So we've really approached this as running it like a true business. I mean, guys get an honest paycheck. The wages in my shop are far superior to any shop in the hot rod industry out there, and I think that's why we've been able to retain the quality employees that we do. Is just that they see growth within the company. The company continues to grow itself, and we reciprocate, and we give them a pretty outstanding place to work. And in addition to that, they can see that the profits of this company, they go directly back into the company. We're constantly buying new equipment. I'm constantly renovating the shop, and this is really my dream. It's my home, and I just keep kind of rolling it back into the company and letting it grow and grow and grow.
So I would bet you would say the pay definitely justifies the time spent.
I think so. Yeah, I mean, the pay for the guys here, as a fabricator in the hot rod industry, they're not going to find better pay. But I think a lot of the guys, it's a lot more than that for them. It's being a part of the projects that we provide, and just kind of the atmosphere that we provide. You can throw money at guys, and you're only going to keep them so happy. You've got to make it an enjoyable place to work.
Okay. And how about for yourself? Does the time justify the pay?
I think so. I mean, I said kind of going into this, my goal was never to be rich and famous. It was just to kind of, I guess, support my addiction to cars and the hobby, and I've been able to do that. So I think I've accomplished everything I've set out to do, as long as I can kind of sneak a project for myself in here or there, or make enough money to buy a few fun toys, then I'm happy. I'm not looking to line my pockets. I'm just looking to offer a fair place to work and be able to fund my car addiction.
So go ahead and tell us about managing this business. I mean, obviously it's a big operation. So what are the primary tools you're using? I'm assuming you're probably beyond QuickBooks by now. You have shop managers, clipboards. How are you managing all this stuff?
So that's kind of where we're at right now, is just beyond QuickBooks. And my brother Phil, he's the guy that heads up that department. So our business, it's kind of, we split the roles really right down the middle, where he handles kind of all the business end of things, all the scheduling end of things, and I handle the operations and how things get done, when they get done, and how well they get done. So he's typically delegating on that end, and we're just now implementing a whole new software that it's called GlobalShop, and we're kind of taking and just streamlining everything to where we can monitor all our materials better, generate just better work orders that are more useful for the employees, and that's a major transition in the business right now. Me myself, I'm kind of old school. I'm very visual, so I'm kind of the clipboard guy. I like to have it printed out. I like to have it in front of me. Good old-fashioned just lists and clipboards and spreadsheets and things stuck up all over the wall, and I like to see it in front of me, and I can see what I'm accomplishing,
So
what needs to happen, and
that-
make it happen.
The GlobalShop software you mentioned, is that like a dealership software, or where did you find that?
That's just, it's kind of a manufacturing-based software,
Okay.
and you'll find it's common in a lot of job shops, things like that, job shop manufacturing, and bigger fabrication facilities.
Okay, very cool. And before we move on to a little bit more about yourself, I wanted to take a second and talk about the new class from EFI University. EFI University is hosting a new class called Essentials of Operating a Shop. If you're interested in learning how to run your shop more efficiently, this class is for you. For details and to find a class near you, go to EFI101.com and look for the Essentials of Operating a Shop class. Our next class is being held in Denver, Colorado on July 16th, followed by Charlotte, North Carolina on July 23rd. Be sure to use the coupon code DIFAL for $50 off when you sign up. Okay, so moving on more about yourself here, what's something that you struggle with in business and how do you deal with it?
Oh, the struggle, for me is really just staying satisfied and pleasing myself. I find it kind of easy to keep up with the workflow and the fast pace and the stress and all that, but I guess I'm always just pushing and pushing and pushing and never really satisfied. So to me, that's the biggest struggle is, building a car that satisfies me, building a chassis that satisfies me, coming out with that next product that is groundbreaking. I'm not really one to just kind of sit back and ride on my coattails. I'm always pushing. So it's a bit of a struggle because it's a fast-paced industry, and it's hard to keep pushing and keep coming up with more and more innovative and cutting edge ideas. So that's kind of the internal struggle that I've got.
Okay. Do you have a 1-year plan for yourself or the business?
Again, I think this comes back to kind of making a business plan or not making a business plan. I approach it as just kind of busting ass and working hard every day, and just setting daily goals and monthly goals and pushing to produce more, improve the shop, improve the quality of our products. So I don't look and say that next year I want to make X amount of dollars or I want to produce X amount of chassis. I work as hard as I can work, and I push as hard as I can, and when that time comes, I think I'll sit back and reflect on what was accomplished more so than planning in the future, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. So you're really enjoying exactly what you're doing, and you don't need any deviation from what you are doing now, huh?
Not really. I mean, I've got future plans for some interesting products that, as I mentioned before, kind of bring a whole new genre of vehicles into the shop. So some product plans that, I forecast being out there a year or so down the line, but, no real structured goals. That might not sound the best from a business owner from business this size, but it all just, to me, comes back to just working hard every day.
Okay. Do you have an exit plan ever, or is this kind of like what you want to do until you retire?
I think I'll do this as long as my body will allow me to do it. And I don't, at this point, I'm a young guy, I'm 33 years old, and I'm not looking for retirement or an exit plan from this. I'm doing what I love to do. I couldn't imagine doing anything more enjoyable than this, so I plan to stick with it and keep growing it and continue to have fun with it as long as I possibly can.
Okay. I wanted to touch a little bit on like shop organization. And, when you get to that big of an operation, it's obviously critical. What are some of the things you do to keep this shop organized?
Keeping the shop organized has been, I'd say, one of the biggest challenges, and that's something that I spend countless hours on. You can only produce so much. You've got to stay organized. That's everything in this business, and we have such a vast product line of chassis. I mean, if you were to sit down and look at every version of chassis that we build, there's hundreds of them, and in each one of those there's dozens and dozens of parts. So you've got thousands of parts and components, all various thicknesses of steel, different bend angles, just tons and tons of different components. So what we've done is I just constantly implement new procedures. I'm always out there changing things up, seeing what our weak points are, working with the chassis guys. It could be something as simple as getting them more hardware to mock chassis up when I see them going back and forth to the bolt bin too much, or each guy his own clamps or his own workstation with every component that he needs to build what he's working on. But I think we learned an awful lot from it. Came up with a lot of solutions, came up with a lot of things that maybe didn't work as well as they should have, and everything we learned we applied into this new facility when we moved in there for kind of building this whole new chassis manufacturing facility. So that's kind of just a massive display of organization. There's pallet racking as far as you can see, with organized blue bins that are labeled and part numbered with pictures, and there's, I mean, you name it, it's as organized as I think you can get within reason, and that's been a blessing with our success. I mean, we couldn't do the volume that we're doing without staying on top of that.
Okay, so you're doing a lot of process improvement and like workflow analysis and watching your guys work and making sure they can do their job as quickly as possible. Constantly. Okay. So what's something you can tell our listeners that they can take to improve their situation?
Man, to improve, well, I guess I don't really know what their situation is, but, I just believe in working hard and not giving up and not second guessing yourself. I mean, if you're in business and you're having some success, you probably got there from having some good common sense and a good gut instinct. And I think that's one of those things that gets you a lot further than any business plan, is just going with your gut and trusting yourself to make the right decisions and stick with the decisions that you make.
Okay. So moving on to the quick answer questions, and these are just whatever comes to your mind on this stuff. So tell us about a game-changing product you've seen in the last year.
I think honestly, and I hate to say this, but in our industry, it's a little lackluster as far as game changers go. You see a lot of things. I don't see anything within our industry that's a game changer per se. I mean, I look at things that are just out there in general retail and things that kind of blow my mind as to the success they've had with them. But I couldn't really put my finger on one thing that really stands out to me.
Okay. And what software are you using daily?
Software is kind of all over the board. I mean, we're working in SolidWorks, we're working in AutoCAD, and we work in a 2D system called En-Route. Guys working in Rhino, you name it. I mean, Mastercam, lots and lots of different softwares that just help us produce the product that we do.
Okay, very cool. And what's your favorite app? And this can be anything from like Facebook or, like an email app or whatever you want.
I think, in our industry, Instagram's been just such a huge tool. It's everything that's going on in every shop, every vehicle being built, every product coming out. Instagram's kind of the hub for that. So you're kind of disconnected unless you're cruising Instagram and seeing everything that's out there.
Okay, that's very interesting. And then for the import side, I still see a lot of people mostly on Facebook. But it's not as pretty.
Yeah, Facebook, it just for businesses, it kind of took a turn. And I'm not our social media guy. We've got an outstanding guy that handles that, but you don't seem to get the exposure through Facebook that you do on Instagram anymore.
Very true. What's your favorite shop tool?
My favorite shop tool, I don't know, if you asked me that years ago, I'd probably say the power hammer, because I'm kind of a diehard metal shaping guy. But recently we bought a ferro arm that has a high def laser scanner on it, mm-hmm. and that was one of those tools that was a sizable investment that was a little nerve wracking as to how much use we would get out of it. But to see that tool in action and to see the windows that it's opened up for our business, it's an amazing piece, and there's just so much that we accomplished with that tool that I don't know how we ever got by without it.
Very cool. And are you doing any 3D printing as well, or you just do it on the CNC?
We do, and that's something that we're outsourcing, and that's something that in the near future we'll be bringing in-house, because that's an amazing technology, and doing CNC stuff in-house, you see what the expense is of doing really unique 3D parts that are one-off, just from the tool pathing to just how long it takes for that part to run in the machine. So it's pretty amazing what you can do. And there's even printable parts that we use. We just printed some mirrors for a 69 Camaro, and that'd be something that would be hundreds of hours to machine, as complex as they are, and in about overnight you can print them, and it's a usable part right there on the car. So I think that's something that sometime this year we'll bring that technology in-house.
Very cool. What are you driving right now?
Oh, whatever's got gas in it or the keys in it that day. We got a big selection of stuff. It's kind of like your shoemaker story that I typically drive an old beat up pickup truck, but you got a few little cool shop cars. Got a '68 Camaro that's got our new spec chassis under it. It's a fun little car to drive, and then I've got a '69 Camaro big block that's been a car I've had for a long time, but nothing outstanding. I mean, we spend more time focusing on customer vehicles.
I think that's exactly what most people say too.
Yeah, really. You talk to probably 90% of the guys in this industry, and they're driving a pickup truck or nothing glamorous.
So, what do you think the future of automotive performance is going to be?
We see it going. It's just getting more and more technology driven. I don't know where the future will go. That's kind of hard to tell, but I think that as advanced as it's getting, it's kind of weeding out some of the fly-by-night guys, and to be competitive in this industry now, you got to kind of bring your A game. So I just see pretty much all the products, whether it's a chassis or shocks or suspension or billet parts, I just see them getting much more advanced. There's a lot of OEM technologies that'll likely cross over and be incorporated into this. I mean, and a lot of things that have stayed the same from, shock dampers have been relatively the same for years. I'm sure that stuff will go to magnetic ride or electronically controlled, that you see a little bit of that. So just more and more kind of tech-driven products, I think. And
you guys just brought a dyno in-house too as well for engine tuning?
We did, yeah. Brought a dyno in-house for doing chassis tuning. It's a in-ground chassis dyno, just to be able to tune the vehicles we build and eventually use it for another source of revenue, bringing in more and more local business.
And that's because a lot of these pro touring cars are using like modern LS engines and not the old carbureted stuff, right? So
correct. Every single vehicle we do is some variation of a injected LS motor.
Okay, so EFI tuning is something you will be doing.
Yep. We're doing it now, and we've got an outstanding tuner in house, and up until now we've just been kind of working with some local shops, using their facility, using some of their skills, but it's out of necessity. We really had to bring it in house.
Okay. And how do we connect with you and your company?
You can hit us up at roadstershop.com and check out all the amazing chassis products and builds that we've got on our website, or through social media. Just look for Roadster Shop on Instagram or Roadster Shop on Facebook. And if you don't catch us there, we're cruising around the country doing Good Guys shows and SEMA, and we're kind of try to be everywhere.
Just look for the giant semi that says Roadster Shop on it, right?
That's it.
Cool. Well, hey, Jeremy, I really appreciate you taking some time to talk to us, and this is a really cool story you got. So
you got it. It was my pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Do It for a Living. You can find out more about this guest, this show, and even details about what we just talked about at our website, doitforaliving.net. Check out the Facebook page at facebook.com/doitforaliving. and tell us who you want to hear from. And most importantly, subscribe to the podcast. Click subscribe. Do it now.